Hello, welcome to Street Chat number 5, I think, now we're at.
Yeah, five or
Uh,
six. Yeah, we
there
need to
was
check
the
that.
unofficial, unrecorded, unsaved one, so it's a bit unclear. I think it's 5. Today we are talking about auto versus manual settings and a bit more settings in general for street photography. Then we're going to share a couple of street togs that we like, and finally we'll finish with a reminder about the street challenge at the end. So welcome, Yuri.
Hello, Chris, and hello to everyone whoever's watching, if anyone's watching.
I've been seeing the view counts on the YouTube videos, and they've been viewed a few times actually. So thank you, everyone.
All by me.
No, and me as well.
Yeah.
By both of us
Yeah.
watching, and again, the boost the view counts.
But
Or maybe
know.
not. Yeah, and I actually don't know if Blab, because you can replay on Blab as well, so I don't know if other people have watched on Blab. If you have been watching, maybe you'd like to send Yuri or I a message on Twitter so we know that it's not just us watching on repeat. You should be able to see our usernames, I think, on the Blab channel. So, auto versus manual settings. Why don't we start? How do you usually shoot on the street? Do you go for auto? Do you go for manual?
Well, I started out with auto when I just started shooting on the street, and gradually when I started to learn the settings, learn about settings and how everything works, the exposure, the shutter speed, the aperture priority, how to work with depth of field. Then gradually I started to move on to the next settings on my camera. I tried a bit to play around with shutter speed and so on and so forth. But at the moment I went back a little bit and I'm shooting with P mode, which is a program mode. I think on most cameras.
Okay.
Which kind of helps me to really concentrate and focus on actually framing, transferring my vision into an image. I really can on framing, composition, and telling the story really.
Mm.
And as everything happens so quickly on the street, I really, for me personally, I don't have time to fiddle with settings. I mean, so at the moment I shoot mostly in program mode, P mode. However, I can only say that I can now shoot in P mode, but only after I've learned all the settings. So in case that I don't get my shot right, if it's not correct, if I took a picture and I know I'm not supposed to look at the LCD screen, but if you're beginning with street photography, if you're a beginner and you took a shot and you look at the LCD screen and your image is blurred, I know how to fix it. I know how to correct it. I know why it's blurred. My shutter speed is too slow. And so, I can then change the settings. So it's important to know the settings, obviously, because you can just go on auto, and in low situations you just have your flash popping out all the time, and you don't want flash. You want to use the light that's available. So it is important and crucial to know all the settings and exposure triangle and how they interact, and then you can choose whatever settings you want, really, whatever works for you. So for me, at the moment, it's P mode.
I think, yeah, that's being in Krakow and having lots of tourists around. It's always a great, it's pretty easy to identify who's got their camera in auto mode as soon as they go to take a picture and the flash just pops up. Like, that would be auto. I've seen people like try to take a big landscape picture of like Mariatsky Church, and then all of a sudden the flash pops up. And it's like, don't think that it's gonna help here.
Yeah, don't think it's necessary, really.
maybe the camera brain's not quite there on that one. Yeah, I think one of the things you said at the start is really, that's my aim. And I think that is the aim that you want from what you set your settings, is to just be able to focus on taking the picture, composing the picture, and not have to worry about what your settings are, no matter how you set up your settings. If you go for manual or if you go for automatic. Like David Barnett in our street chat, he had a really great quote, which I'm going to try and get up at the moment. And it was that basically you want your settings to be, you want to have the settings out of the way before you engage your subject. Exposure settings, decisions matter, but should be sorted before engaging with your subject. And I think that's what, however you set up your settings, automatic, manual, that's what your end aim should be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it doesn't need to be a distraction for you. If you in a situation where you want to take a picture and you distract it continuously by your settings, I mean, that doesn't work. You have to acknowledge it and you have to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my approach for settings at the moment, I think I started out with my settings when I got my first sort of Philly camera, as I like to say. It was a mirrorless, so I don't really know what name you should give for it. But fiddly camera, I think, is a good name for it. I was shooting mostly in aperture priority, I think. So I'd set the aperture. I can't even remember if I set the ISO first of all, or I think I set the ISO as well, and then let the shutter speed be decided by the computer's brain. And of course, as a beginner, bokeh is the best thing in the world. So that worked out fine. The shutter speed was high. And
it's the bee's knees, right?
Oh yeah, like every now and again, I do love just going, let's see, how fast can we set this lens? Woohoo, bokeh! So, like, I think street photographers can get a bit snobby about bokeh, but it's quite nice, isn't it? So
yeah. Although there are exceptions everywhere, and I've seen a lot of not a lot. I've seen a few great photographers which use bokeh very wisely and very artistically, and it comes out so good. But you have to know how to use it really properly. I mean, you don't go on everything and focus on the wheel and then blur everything out. So, nice wheel, for example.
Yeah, I think it is a I think for too many people it's a crutch, and it was for me for sure. It was just like, oh look, bokeh makes. I saw a travel photography tip, and it was like the higher your f-stop, the more interesting your picture. So like, well, no. The more people know that you've got an expensive lens. So
yeah.
I think
there's a lot of
that. To be fair though, if it's a boring picture, probably it is improved by having bokeh. To be honest, if you've got a pretty boring subject, boring background, bokeh does improve it. Like, maybe that's a bit off.
There is a percent of creativity there, I guess, which is created by camera anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's the way it is. I mean, but essentially, aperture mode, I think, is for. It's more used for landscapes or architecture or portraiture. You know, it's. I don't think it's mostly used in street photography, but you know, it's up to a photographer really how he uses it in the end.
So I've changed my setting approach. So I used to be very much aperture priority, and I think I was between 2 and 5 at highest. For 5.6, lots of depth of field there. But now I pretty much exclusively shoot with I set the aperture to about 8 or f8 or f11. Sometimes f16 if it's really bright, and I set the shutter speed to about 1/250 usually. Sometimes I go for a bit longer, 1/30, and then I have the ISO set for auto. So that means I'm guaranteed good depth of field, so I can get lots of things in focus, but also often the foreground can be out of focus, which I quite like. And at the same time, I know that the action's going to be frozen apart from the fastest moving items. So I know that I'll capture that expression. I know that I'll line up the elements into the shot. And changing to 1/30 means that I know that I'll get some blur and like the lens, like motion blur from moving as well, motion blur of subjects as well as maybe movement of the hand as well from my lens. So that's probably the settings I use most of the time. And I like auto ISO because it means I don't have to think about the exposure. So the exposures, so that for me means I get the type of shot I want, and it's quick as well, which on some cameras I find, I don't want my camera to think too much. So giving it one setting to change, I think, helps it to process a lot quicker than other things. And I know the type of image that I'll get. Maybe it will have a bit more grain or less grain, but that doesn't bother me too much.
Yeah. So you set up. It's mostly manual, yeah, and then you set ISO and auto.
Yeah, so actually, even I think it's worth coming to as a later point. Even the focus I set for hyperfocal, so I set it focused on the distance, on the far distance, so that the foreground will be out of focus. Because I find that it depends on the camera, it depends on the lens. But some lenses, they really take a long time to. One of the things I really hated. I didn't hate. One of the things I started to notice with my Olympus as soon as I tried out different cameras, I had a Panasonic 20mm pancake lens, which worked out as 40mm equivalent, which was very nice, like really, really nice lens, good sharpness and so on. But it only autofocused, and unless you like set it for a certain point already. And it was slow to change autofocus. And I missed getting the moment I wanted with that lens. So setting it up so that it's already pre-focused means that the camera just doesn't have to think as much. So clicking is almost instantaneous now with my setting. And that's what I want to go for. So I'm basically manual everything apart from one setting. And it helps because the to be honest, the Fuji actually is really tricky to change the ISO settings.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to change. It's in my bag here. Yeah. So to change shutter speed, you've got a dedicated dial. You've got a dedicated dial for your shutter speed on top, which is here, and then you've got the aperture ring. But the ISO, you don't have a dial for. You have to go into, settings.
To the settings, yeah.
then press one across, and then you can change the
So you really wanna decide on that before
yeah.
you go out. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're if you're using the optical viewfinder, you have to take the camera down to look down at the LCD screen and go between it. If you're using the electronic finder, then it pops a menu which blocks your field of view, and you're interacting with a menu. So it's just auto ISO. I am such a fan of auto ISO. I think it's the best thing ever because it's
good. Yeah.
yeah, it just I think it's the setting which like I said to you in our Twitter chat, like ISO used to be a setting you couldn't change. You'd have to, if you wanted to change it, you'd have to finish your roll of film and then put it in.
Yeah, with film shooting, yeah.
And so then your other settings, your shutter speed or your aperture, is going to be determined by your ISO to some degree. But really, the effect you want is determined, like the depth of field and how motion blur. That is, you want to set those the most, I think. And with modern cameras, they're good up to. Some of them are like one of these Sony's is good up to ISO like 512,000 or something like this with very little noise. So I think if I had to choose a setting to auto adjust, it would be that.
Yeah, and it's also important to mention, I think, for to people not to be afraid of high ISO. So
especially in streets.
Especially in the streets, yeah, it just adds the grittiness and the authenticity.
Yeah, especially so many
the atmosphere. Sorry, go on.
you finish off, and then I'll come back to.
Yeah. It's just not to not to be afraid, and if it's too high, because the grain actually, I think, it brings the authenticity and to the atmosphere of street photography. Yeah. So
I love how there are so many filter sets, things like Silver Effects Pro, Vosco Cam, and all the others. They want to add grain to your images, and to be honest, unless you're really shooting at night, assuming you're not shooting with an iPhone, your grain is not going to be that bad, to be honest. And as you say, it will add grit and reality, I think, to it. It adds that old-fashioned style. So yeah, don't be afraid of grit. Well, noise, that's one.
Yeah, it's probably somewhere here in the building. Someone's breaking the wall.
I thought what you said about chimping was kind of an interesting thing as well. Like there's feedback loops is this idea where so the idea of feedback loop, you take a photo, you look, you observe, and then you can change things, take a photo, look and observe. And I know chimping is seen as a really, really bad thing to do. But I think if you are just starting out, I don't think it's necessarily the worst thing to do because of that feedback, and it helps you to learn the settings and adjust how you are shooting. What do you think? Is maybe chimping is a bit has got a bit too bad a reputation? Maybe it has its place.
Yeah. No, but I think I think you're right. For beginners, I would agree that it's good to have a look at the LCD screen and immediately, so you learn as you go. I mean, if you want answers, why I took a picture, but why is it overexposed? So right, do I need to put a higher f-stop? Or how do I do that? And then you play along. So it's actually when you're out shooting, and I mean, you're not shooting for a magazine and or instantly for Facebook likes or whatever. You're shooting for yourself. You want to learn. You want to improve. So in the beginning, I think you actually should look at check your LCD screen. I think it's important. I mean, that's what I did anyway. And now I'm gradually. I'm pretty much. I think I quit chimping. Only occasionally, I do look at my screen, just in case I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's maybe if it's too bright or too dark, just to make sure. But when you're in the zone on the street, in the end, you don't really look at the back of your screen, because you're there. I mean, you're in the city, you're amongst the people, you're in the zone. The camera is extension of your hand, and you're going with the flow, and you're taking pictures, and you're thinking, right, it doesn't matter. It's not, no expectations. We'll look at the pictures later. So
yeah, I think what was things like taking David's idea about, you want to get the exposure right beforehand. So for me, like if you've got a mirrorless camera, often you have an electronic viewfinder, and those can help you see pretty much what you're going to see in the final picture. So I don't have to worry about exposure too much when I'm taking pictures, because the electronic viewfinder shows me that. But even still, like sometimes as soon as I start out shooting, I'll just take a couple of test shots, just make sure I'm getting the exposure right. And, if I'm looking around and there's not a lot going on, I might then, that's probably where I still sort of chimp. Like I try and do a chimp on a test shot, so that I'm not going to be distracted when I'm actually, in that moment, when there is a moment worth shooting. So I think maybe that's good advice as well for a beginner. Chimping in a good way. If you're not sure about your settings, if you've got an SLR and you can't see what you're going to shoot beforehand, perhaps do that. Start off, set up the settings you think are right. Take a picture, take a test picture of whatever, and then see how it turns out in the end.
Yeah, it's a great way to learn. Guys, whoever's watching, if you're into street photography, we're talking about settings. If you need settings, if you need to know the settings before you go out shooting. So if you have any questions or you want to pop in and discuss this with us.
I think they left. Oh well.
Just in case.
We scared them.
Why did you leave?
Love me. So some more things on settings. I'm trying to find something good from what we said last time.
I want to mention as well the zone focus. That is probably what you use as well, I suspect.
Yeah.
So kind of it focuses on the whole scene.
Yeah, because I think there's difference. There's zone focusing and hyperfocal. So zone focusing is where you know roughly the area that you're going to focus in. Hyperfocal is where you set from infinity to wherever. So if you're hyperfocal on a high f-stop like f8, f11, f16, f22 even, then you'll get a very big depth of field, right? Going right up close to you. Whereas zone focusing, you can do it so that you have a meter in front of you to 2 meters in front of you is in focus. So that's perhaps more useful if you're doing something like nighttime flash photography. So I've experimented a bit with that, where you have only, because obviously you probably want your lens to be a bit faster for nighttime, although the flash can compensate for that. But you probably don't want if you've got something like f16 on your flash, ISO 100, then you're probably going to have a really, really bright flash. I can't imagine how bright that would be, even if it's just for a meter in front of you. But yeah, so that's quite a useful trick to do. That you set up for a meter or 2 meters in front of you with your flash for your zone focus. So it's a small difference, but I confuse the terms all the time though, because I equate zone focusing with hyperfocal. Because when I think of zone focusing, I'm like, oh yeah, hyperfocal, of course.
Yeah, it is a bit confusing, but yeah, it's a good point for low light nighttime shooting. Yeah,
I know some photographers who will do even in the daytime, they'll do something like f 5.6 or something and focus up close. So because they'll work out roughly when they're a meter away from someone. So the aim is to be always like a meter or a couple of meters away from the subject. And that's what they know that will be in focus. And that's another way to have like quick instant snapping pictures without the lag of autofocus. Because I think autofocus probably, in my experience, maybe this is completely wrong, but in my experience, autofocus is the slowest thing to set up. Perhaps it's because I've been setting up the camera wrong, using all the focal points or whatever. But yeah, I'm really not a fan of autofocus, because I've had moments where you go to take a shot and it focuses on the background, not the foreground, or it focuses on the foreground, not the background.
Yeah, I mean, it is it is a machine in the end. I mean, the camera. If you leave everything up to your camera to decide, you'll have some bad decisions there.
But I mean, one of the things that, and it's also something you can't edit as much afterwards. Whereas, exposure, if you're a stop or two wrong and you've got raw, you're still okay. Focus. Although there are these Lytro things. Have you seen these where they're supposed to be able to change the depth of field after the fact? So like,
Really?
Yeah, crazy technology. I've seen some pretty poor results, but they do what they say they do, but they just...
In my head, I can only come up with poor results. I need to see that. Yeah, I'm going to check it out.
They're kind of interesting, but they don't seem... It seems like the sort of stuff, 10 years time, this will be really good and we'll all be using. But right now, it's kind of like, yes, if you have a Lego figure and you're up close and everything's frozen and nothing's moving and there's no disturbances, yes, you can get a really good picture then. And it's amazing. Anything else you want to say about settings?
Yes. Well, you mentioned with when shooting RAW, obviously you can tweak with exposure and white balance after in post-production in Lightroom or Photoshop, whatever you're using. So that's the advantage of shooting RAW as well. And I shoot in RAW most of the time. Again, unless, well, I can't think of an example, but most of the time it's RAW setting on my camera. So later, if it's a little bit underexposed or overexposed, I can play along, because the RAW file contains pretty much all the details. Whereas a JPEG file, it's already compressed. It's already post-processed for you, if you like.
I don't know if there's any distinct advantages, because I've been thinking about experimenting with shooting in JPEG to have a more film-like experience. The sort of idea that, what you shoot is what you get. But at the same time, I love the comforting safety blanket of knowing, oh, but I've got RAW, I can edit that. So I've never, I don't think, I can't. I know there are some people who prefer to shoot RAW, especially JPEG, sorry, especially with the Fuji cameras, because their film simulations are pretty nice. But,
yeah, that's what I heard as well. That's what I heard as well from Valérie Jardin, I believe.
Yeah. Plus, also, Lightroom does not like Fuji as much as other companies for some reason. I've noticed that a few times where I've had images, and I was noticing that I prefer the Fuji pictures before editing. I prefer in general, I think Fuji images before editing look pretty good, and then when you edit them, they look a bit better. But Olympus images, I used to think, oh, these are all right, and then I edit them, and I'm like, wow, okay, the colors really pop now, or oh, this is really good. So personal observations, of course.
Yeah.
Personal opinions. I like Olympus.
But I think you should try. There's nothing wrong with trying. I mean, you should try JPEG, shooting JPEG, and see how it goes.
Yeah, I think actually, for this shoot a roll of film challenge, that is what I should do. We should new idea, adding on the street challenge that we set last week. This is an additional rule. You've got to shoot JPEG as well. So it really is shooting a roll of film. So you have to make sure you get your settings right and all of that beforehand. Should be fun.
Last minute edition.
Yeah. Shall we? I don't know. Is there anything else to say about settings?
I'm just looking at my. It's something that I wrote down earlier.
I think a general tip: experiment as well. That was partially why we had the 500 photo challenge. Just try out, see what happens when you do like 1/15, 1/5, 1/30 shutter speeds. You can get some really cool effects coming out from that. Try different depths of field, try different ISOs. A lot of people say, oh, you shouldn't use, the camera's good up to a certain ISO level. In street photography, you can go beyond that. So just experiment, see what your eye likes in terms of noise.
Yeah, like definitely. That's a good tip. Yeah, you practice and experiment, and then when you find something that you like, just stick to it. And if it's manual settings, it's manual settings. If you like to blur the movement, then you do that, and you have a nice series of photos with blurred movements. Like,
have you seen that
series? A lot of photographers that do that. Yeah,
there's a series. I really wish I could remember the name of the guy. It's kind of, he takes shots from like above on really busy developing. I think they're only developing countries, but he's probably got some in some other countries. So he shoots down on like a street, and he gets loads of movement going through. But then you'll have a couple of people who are stationary because they're in a shop stall or something, and it's a really amazing effect. And I think he has some great photos from that. So I think it's a good tip as well. When find something you like and stick with that for a while. Do a project on it with those settings, because you get your style from that.
Yeah, because if you use it well and artistically, and if you are creative enough, and then you shoot for yourself. I mean, if you like what you see, then stick to it, and persistence.
Yeah. Okay, Street Talk recommendation times. I'm excited about my one. So just before we went on air, Yuri reminded me of someone I should. He gave me an idea for where I could find someone, so I changed my choice at the last moment. I'm choosing Dougie Wallace. Have you heard of him?
What is the name again?
Dougie Wallace.
Dougie
He's
Wallace.
street photographer. His latest project, the last project he did was Harrodsburg. That's the last one I heard about him, where he was like taking pictures of Knightsbridge area around Harrods,
Right.
and showing sort of like the rich Arabic families often who are hanging out around there. Not just Arabic families, rich people around Harrods, and he's quite up in your face. Uses flash.
I can see that. Yeah, I'm just checking out the website.
Yeah, I think so he gets a lot of people are a bit unsure of his style because he's he's up very close with wide angle, but I really like his style. So he was someone I recommended for the Street Hunters most influential photographers of 2016, right?
That's great. That's great. That's and I'm not familiar with this photographer, so I'm looking at these images now, and
he's got one of Shoreditch as well, which is pretty good. So yeah, really, really recommend him.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I like his style because I think he really does street projects. So I think there are a lot of street photographers who their projects you could verge a bit more on documentary and things like that. Whereas his ones, I would say, are really strict street. They're not lots of candid things without permission. But they build into a project, which I think is quite impressive. I think it's a challenge for people.
Yeah, I can also say that already by looking at these images, and they're all up close, and the distance, the proximity is so.
Yeah.
He's so close to his subjects that already massive respect and admiration.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, I really like his style though. So especially with flash, because it must be, you're gonna get noticed. He's from Glasgow, so perhaps that explains it. So I'll add your one in now. Let's see who have you got.
Yeah, I've sent you the link on Twitter message.
Here we go.
It's a Thai photographer.
Mm-hmm.
Whose most work you will find on Flickr. I think that's the first thing that came out anyway on Google. So he's an award-winning photographer and probably one of the best-known photographers from Thailand, whom I nominated as well for top 20 most influential street photographers.
Did you share his pictures of the water festival recently? I think. Is that the guy?
Yes, I think it was his project.
Oh yeah! Oh wow! Yeah, I can see.
Yeah, so
I recognize some of these.
Yeah, it's really it's very clever with compositions and very quick on kind of catching those moments.
Wow.
It's quite some complex images, some really kind of insane pictures, and you think, what happened? What's happening there? How did he catch that?
Flash, off-camera flash, maybe. I think for some of these, I'm just wondering how he's getting some of these lighting details.
Yes, I do believe he uses off-camera flash as well at times.
Yeah. Oh wow. He really sees the light. Interestingly. Yeah, definitely. Oh, Sagrada Familia, I think. No.
So
Conan Dom. Oh, wow, that's a great one. I'll have to definitely check out some more of his stuff.
It's a good example as well for strong single images as well.
Yeah. So yeah, Tavan Pong Prav.
Tavpong Pratumwong, I think. I might be wrong.
My Thai is a drink. No, yeah, I don't speak Thai. So I won't try again. I hope you've enjoyed this street chat. If remember the street challenge is to shoot a roll of film. So we're adding in a little additional thing. It's 24 or 36 images in one go, shooting JPEG, so you can't edit after the fact. You have to try and get it as right in camera as you possibly can. Share your 3 best photos on the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/streettogs. And
So no post-production, is that right?
I think you can post. You can edit JPEGs after the fact. You can edit JPEGs, but it must limit how much you can edit them. I've never really tried editing JPEGs.
No, but what I mean is no cropping then.
Yeah, no cropping. As close to as out of camera as possible.
Yeah, because I'm still a cropper.
I've stopped cropping now, which is interesting.
Have you?
Well, pretty much. For Instagram, I crop. Because Instagram does not like, especially in portrait mode, Instagram really does not like 16 by 9. Is that the one? 16 by 12 is 9. I forget what the Fuji is. The APS-C sensor size. Micro Four Thirds. Oh, loves that. But Fuji, no. So I still crop sometimes for that, especially. But pretty much other things. Okay, well, thank you for. Oh, remember, at the weekend, Saturday, hopefully, there should be another street chat. I think we'll go for projects. Should be a good thing to talk about. Maybe starting your first or next street project. I think that could be a good challenge to start. Cool. So, see you on the next street chat then.
Thank you. See you around.